Members, we have a quorum. May I call to order the meeting of the panel on food safety and environmental hygiene. Welcome, members. Since the last meeting, the minutes of the special meeting held on the 8th of April have been sent to members, and the Secretariat has not received any proposals for amendments. Can we confirm the minutes, please? If there are no objections, the minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of April are confirmed. And then since the last meeting, that is as at the 12th of June, we have received a few papers. The clerk has issued those papers to members. Please note those papers. Okay, now let's go into item 3, date of the next meeting, and items for discussion. Before the summer recess, we will hold a meeting on the 11th of July at 2:30 p.m. 3 items are earmarked for that meeting. We have arranged for the discussion of one progress of the labeling of GM food, and that is item 2 of the list of outstanding items for discussion. 2, progress of the initiatives under the new agriculture policy. And number 3, review of fees for liquor licenses. Those are the first 3 items in the list of outstanding items for discussion. Since there are 3 items, 2 hours may not be enough. Members, would you agree that we add 30 minutes to the next meeting, from 2:30 to 5? Okay, if there is no objection, the meeting will last until 5 o'clock. Okay, item 4 on the agenda. This is the first discussion item. The agenda is quite tight, and we have also extended the meeting to 5 o'clock today. First, public consultation on the proposed regulation of metallic contamination in food. The clerk, please ask the administration to come in. After that, we'll talk about the way forward for live poultry trade in Hong Kong, and the last item is survey results on prices of fresh food items in public markets and other retail outlets. The survey was done by the administration, and they are here today to report the findings of that survey. The administration can now come in. I'd like to welcome Undersecretary for Food and Health, Professor Sophia Chan, PAS for Food and Health Food 1, Mr. Kenneth Chan, Dr. Ho Yuk Yin, Consultant and Director of the Center for Food Safety. You have received the paper, and the administration has prepared a PowerPoint. It's quite long. Undersecretary, are you going to do the introduction? If yes, please go quickly so we have enough time to ask questions. Thank you. I'll be as quick as possible. On the 6th of June, last week, we started the public consultation for 3 months for proposed amendments to the food adulteration metallic contamination regulations. Dr. Ho will be walking us through the PowerPoint, but allow me to talk about regulatory control on metallic contamination in food. Let me talk about the philosophy and the principles. Of course, this time around, we are proposing amendments in order to enhance the efficacy of the control and also protect public health. We'd like to allow Hong Kong standards to dovetail with international standards. We have considered different factors. We have availed ourselves to the Codex metallic contamination levels and also relevant standards in other jurisdictions. And of course, we have to look at our own consumption pattern, dietary practice, and risk assessments. The CFS has also consulted their food experts and also the Advisory Council on Food and Health. This time around, we have indeed, in a way, overhauled our regulation. The metallic contamination will be increased from 7 to 14, and also the maximum levels, mLs, that will be increased from 19 to 145. 90 are more stringent than the existing maximum permitted. We understand that the chairman has proposed that on the 3rd of July there would be a public hearing. So the CFS on the 18th of July and also 11th of August, they will conduct 2 public hearings to collect public views. Dr. Ho, please walk us through the PowerPoint. Yes, thank you, Chairman. I will be as brief as possible, and I'll walk you through the proposed amendments. As you know, metal exists in the environment, and it can contaminate food. And during food production, metals can go into the food chain. Very often, adults would be exposed to metals through their diet. And there can be a few examples. As you know, cadmium can damage your kidney function. It is carcinogenic. And mercury can affect the development of the brain of fetus. And tin, if there is excessive exposure, there may be vomiting and diarrhea and tummy ache. Our existing control is such that if there are metal contaminants and they are not limited, well, under Cap 132 and 132V, it is stipulated that if any food is damaging to public health or human health, we can regulate them. Right now, we have this food adulteration, metallic contamination regulation, and there are 2 schedules listing the metallic contamination. 4 metallic contaminants, namely arsenic, lead, mercury, and tin, cover all food in solid or liquid form. This is the table.
But this approach, if you pay attention, you will find that if we cover all food in liquid and solid form, there might be a scenario in which the regulation of the maximum level is rather lenient, and that is contrary to the international trend. Under this regulation, I think this regulation has not been amended for a long time. The regulation was implemented in 1960. It was amended in 1983. And it's 30 years now since it was last amended. Our present amendment, the purpose of the present amendment is to align with the international practice and to make reference of the standard of the Codex Alimentarius. As I said, for all metal and liquid food, we would like to specify the maximum concentration level for individual food and food groups, and the definitions we would like to follow the codex and amend them accordingly. For example, in our regulation, we do not say that the maximum level would apply to a food which has been dehydrated, so dried or diluted. So the purpose of the present amendment is to enhance the protection of public health, and that is the most important objective, and also to enhance the efficiency of our regulation so that we will be in line with international standard. The content of the amendment is to amend the maximum level for all types of food and change that to levels for individual foods. Now, if it is not provided for in the Codex, and if these are metal contaminants which are consumed by the local consumers, we will set the maximum level after making reference of the Codex. In the present amendment, we've already fully taken on board the standard of the Codex, and also there are a series of jurisdictions, the standard of which we've made reference of, including Australia, Canada, the EU, Japan, New Zealand, Singapore, and so on. In preparing for our standard, we've taken into consideration the local food consumption patterns, the dietary practice, and the risk assessment studies that we've undertaken. We will, first of all, do away with the maximum level for food in dried or diluted forms, and other than the 7 standards, which we do not think are applicable to Hong Kong, and therefore we propose not to adopt them. Next, I would like to explain what are these 7 which we do not accept. First of all, polished rice, and secondly, the methyl mercury for predatory fish, and tin in certain meat products in containers other than tin plate containers. For now, if we make reference of the standard in the Codex, there are 2 types. For ordinary fish is 0.5 milligram of fish. For predatory fish, which means the larger fish, where the methyl mercury may accumulate in the body and the standard would be 0. So, having done our assessment, we cannot accept the standard for predatory fish, because in Hong Kong there are about 11% of the women who are in the childbearing range. I think the amount of methyl mercury consumed may exceed the standard. So if we relax the limit, then the amount of methyl mercury consumed by such women will be increased, and therefore we're not going to relax the standard. But we've fine-tuned the standard, so we will follow the recommendation of 0.5 for methyl mercury in predatory fish. So it's a minor refinement. Next, polished fish, the maximum cadmium level. According to the Codex, it's 0.4 per kilogram. Our recommendation is 0.2. When we decided on this standard, but there are some signatory states of Codex objected to this recommendation. They believe that the people tend to consume a larger quantity of rice, and 0.4 is too lenient. And the EU, Korea, the mainland China, Singapore, all do not accept the 0.4 standard, and they recommend 0.2. So we also suggest that we should follow the practice of those countries. We believe that 0.2 is sufficient to protect the health of the people of Hong Kong, but it's slightly relaxed from the current standard of 0.1. For the 5 maximum levels for tin in certain meat products in containers other than tin plate containers, well, this ml standard is rather stringent. For the tin content to exceed 250 milligram, only that would result in an acute impact. So we believe that the 5. So even if we exceed this level, it may not really give rise to any health issues. We've also made reference of the practice in other jurisdictions. Again, they have not adopted such a standard. So we believe that we do not recommend to adopt this standard. Dr. Ho, you will need to speed up a little bit. Next, there are some standards which are not in the Codex, and when we set those standards, we have made reference of the food consumption pattern and our previous risk assessment reports, and also the practice in other jurisdictions. When we set these standards, we will also adopt the principle of Codex, namely the contaminants in food should be as reasonably low as possible. We hope that the level should be as low as possible, but at the same time, they will need to be reasonable. Normally, it should be not more than 5%. So that this is the part about the nomenclatures regarding food products which are concentrated, dried. We will use an index to make the necessary adjustments. We are now proposing to increase the number of metallic contaminants from 7 to 14. And the present amendment would propose to regulate the natural mineral waters. These 7 additional metals will not apply to other food items except for mineral waters. So these are the existing 7 metals. What you find below are the 7 newly added additional metals. At the moment, we have 19 standards. In future, it will go up to 145. For the present amendment, one could say it is a comprehensive amendment, and they are a lot more stringent than the current regulations. Of the 145 standards, 90 of them are more stringent, 6 of which are less stringent. For those items for which we have relaxed the standard, we've done so after making reference of the standards of Codex. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ho and the Secretary, for walking through the paper. The Undersecretary told us that the government will be conducting public consultation. I also suggest that we will also conduct a public hearing. Given that it's difficult for us to book the room, so I've asked the clerk to book a room beforehand, and I'd like to consult with members today that on the 3rd of July, in the morning at 10:45 on Monday. From 10:45 to 12:45, the clerk has helped book the room for us, so we can actually convene a meeting on the subject of metal contamination in food. So are members in agreement? The clerk will, as usual, you put up a notice in our website to invite members of the public to attend the public hearing and submit wills. We also write to the 18 district councils and invite submissions from them. So this is the usual practice. For members who have already put up their hands, I'll read out the names. If other members would still like to ask questions, please put up your hands now. Dr. K.K. Kwok, Mr. Kwok Fan, Lau Xiu Lai, Jeremy Tam, myself, Tanya Chen, Dr. N. Zheng. Are there any other members who would like to speak? If not, given that this is a new topic, I propose that each member be given 4 minutes. There may not be a second round. So if there are members who would like to return to this chamber and speak, please come back to this room as soon as possible. So 4 minutes. Dr. K.K. Kwok, thank you. Basically, I support the proposed amendment because the amendments for the different categories of food and the amount, the maximum level of contaminants are tightened. There are two issues I'd like to raise. First of all, enforcement. In order for the different food products to comply with the new regulations, there are two types of food, for imported food and pre-packaged food products. I believe it's easier to regulate because at the point of import, the government can, by way of the regulations, require the manufacturers or the importers to label these products. But for other food products that is consumed in the market, for example, cooked food, how do we enforce these regulations? Secondly, sample tests. How many samples can the government take for inspection purposes? Otherwise, after you've set the regulations, if you cannot enforce them, then it wouldn't be a futile exercise. And thirdly, regarding cadmium in polished rice, right now it's 0.1. It's going to be, after the amendment, it will be 0.2. Although according to Codex, it could be up to 0.4. But I believe Codex does not follow the intake of rice by different people in different jurisdictions. But Hong Kong, like other Chinese communities, people tend to, rice is the staple, main staple food. According to the WHO, the maximum level of cadmium consumed per kilogram is 25 microgram. So when we calculate the maximum level of 0.2, for each adult, how much rice is consumed by each adult? If if a person consumes a high quantity of rice, one could exceed that limit very easily. It's 25 milligram per kilogram. So if a person weighs 60 kilogram, we're talking about 1.2 kilogram a month. I don't know how you arrive at this figure of 0.2 and say it's acceptable. I think the earlier limit of 0.1 is more acceptable. When it was set at 0.1, I think the considerations are already given to the dietary habit of Chinese people. Do you have evidence to prove that since 1960 people are now consuming less rice? So 3 questions.
Undersecretary, thank you, Dr. Kwok, for the 3 questions. In inspecting and also enforcement, we are concerned about both. We have to do both in order to implement any laws. Certainly, we have some thinking, and we have just started the public consultation. The industry and other stakeholders will be speaking to us. Dr. Ho can comment on the details and also talk about polished rice. The regulation already regulates heavy metals in food. We have rich experience in testing and enforcing the law. At the points of import, wholesale, and retail, we will take samples for testing. The standard for polished rice is such that if you assume that the content of cadmium is 0.2, then you may not be able to consume a lot of polished rice. But if we use the average, the cadmium content will be way below 0.1. What is the level you have tested? The present level is 0.1. What about polished rice sold in Hong Kong? It is way below 0.1. Hong Kong people take rice, but it is not a lot of cadmium that they are taking in through eating rice. The Codex one is 25, right? You understand that? And what is the assumption for that calculation? Well, we have the study reports on our website. We have the total dietary study for Hong Kong people. and how much cadmium is consumed by Hong Kong people. There is one column for rice, and it is about 2%. I believe many members will come back to this question. Next, Edward Lau. Thank you, Chairman. You want to dovetail with the international standards. I subscribe to that. But you are not looking at all food in solid liquid form, but you have a targeted approach, and you are going to calculate the exposure of human beings to such metallic contamination in food. But what criteria do you use in order to decide which food or food groups should be subject to a maximum level of metallic content? If there is a food that doesn't have an ml yet, how are you going to monitor it? Secondly, polished rice, 0.1 milligram. Well, it has been well established. We understand that you say you need to dovetail with the international standard, which is 0.4, and now you go for the middle of the road course, 0.2, and is already more stringent than the international standard. But of course, the public would think that the more stringent it is, the more protection for the public. If we keep to 0.1 milligram, would we be facing any pressure? Would the international community take any action? If not, why don't we just stick to 0.1 milligram? Because people have got used to it, and the supply is problem-free. Number 3, fresh food is imported into Hong Kong a lot of the times. Let us look at vegetables. How do you talk to vegetable suppliers on the mainland to make sure that they will understand and follow the new standards? Under Secretary. I will talk about the principles, and I will hand over to Dr. Ho to give more information to Mr. Lau. This time around, our overall objective is to improve our regulation. We want to follow international standards and the Codex standards. When we review the food standards in Codex, and in fact there are foods which are not given a standard in Codex, and therefore we would look at other factors, including local food consumption pattern, dietary practice, and also the CFS does risk assessment of different foods every year. Some foods might have been subject to a few assessment tests, and they have been found to be problem-free. That is one factor for consideration as well. Dr. Ho, from this slide, you can see that when there is no standard in Codex for a certain food, we will take into account certain factors in order to decide the ML. We will look at the local food consumption pattern, and that the public are consuming a lot of such foods, and where there is a high metallic content. We'll also look at our total diet study and also results of risk assessment studies. We'll also look at other places around Hong Kong, whether there are food incidents and their relevant standards, and also we'll adopt the ALARA, as low as reasonably achievable principle in Codex. This is what we do. And of course, the first thing we have in mind is protection of public health. And we don't want to excessively control. In fact, I have 2 other questions. Can we keep 0.1 for polished rice? And are you going to talk to vegetable suppliers on the mainland? Dr. Ho, if we stick to 0.1, other countries are using 0.2, even if they have a stringent standard. If we keep to 0.1, we'll be the most stringent in the whole wide world. And suppliers of rice to Hong Kong, like the mainland, is 0.2, Vietnam 0.4, Thailand no standard. these places can take us to court saying that we are setting up trade barriers. But Dr. Ho, we have used 0.1 for over 30 years. Did anyone question that Hong Kong standard? When we set standards, it was in 1983. And the Codex standards were set about 10 years ago. Well, 0.1 has been well established. The suppliers are keeping to that standard. It's not that if we stick to 0.1, no suppliers will be able to import rice into Hong Kong. Vietnam, Thailand, and the mainland are still able to supply rice to Hong Kong. Let us keep to that for the moment, and if the international community does take us to court or take action, and by then we can make our decision. Is that feasible? Mr. Lau, I think your view is clear. This is within the consultation period, and this is only their proposal. Members can continue to speak up. There will be a public hearing. The administration, you are still listening, right? We will notify the WTO and its members. Well, let them know that if they want to question us, that is the practice in Hong Kong for 30 years. If we keep to 0.1 milligram for cadmium, we are not the most stringent. The same goes for Australia. Well, you can challenge my data. Next member, Lau Siu Lai. Thank you, Chair. Chair, you are really an able leader. I'd like to ask about cadmium as well. Even if we go for the most stringent standard, if it has been well established, well, I do appreciate that you will not follow the Codex standard, which is quite relaxed to the 0.4. If we are going for 0.1 and the supply is continuous, why don't we just stick to it? On the internet, I can see that the more exposure to cadmium there is, there will be a barrier to absorption of calcium, so osteoporosis can result. Chinese women should not consume too much cadmium, of course. If we have been using 0.1, if it is effective, I think that is the most effective way to protect public health. It is not that it is carcinogenic. Of course, it's a high risk as well. But if we can keep osteoporosis to a low level, then I think we should go for 0.1 for cadmium. Any response? Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Lau. As the Chair was saying, this is the consultation period. Well, 0.2 is now proposed. Well, that is the product of some study by the CFS. But we have heard you. We will collate all views received, and then we'll analyze them. You still have time. Well, that is all from me. Jeremy Tam. Thank you, Chairman. I like very much seeing this amendment. Actually, when we talk about lead in water last year, I was made aware of the problem of lead in water. Compared to world standard, we are exceeding that by 1.2 to 128 times. So I think we should have done this long time ago. We're still happy. I'm still happy to see you do it now, because better late than never. Well, if we don't, that is a big threat to food safety in Hong Kong. And we can't allow substandard food to come into Hong Kong. Talking about metallic contamination, I think we are not even doing as well as the mainland. It is possible that food that cannot be imported into the mainland can in fact be properly imported into Hong Kong. But Now you plug the loophole and I support it. I tend to agree with other members on rice. If we have 0.1 for now and it is well established, even if you are not following the guideline of the Codex, you are still pushing it up to 0.2. My view is it that we have no choice of rice in Hong Kong? Well, we have local rice, Thai rice, mainland rice, and Australian, Japanese, and Korean rice in Hong Kong. They are in the market. That means we are not having such stringent laws that we have no choice. I can't see a need to adjust it. I agree with other members that we should not change it. Since we have a choice now, you are relaxing it and maybe there will be new rice crops coming into Hong Kong, then we might suspect that such rice can come into Hong Kong just because we are relaxing the standard. Therefore, I would go for 0.1 for rice. Apart from the factors you cited to support your relaxation, can you say more? Are you facing rather huge pressure or are there other factors so you want to relax the standard? I think Under Secretary, every member will ask that question. They want to preserve 0.1 milligram cadmium level. Dr. Ho?
Perhaps I can explain to members the WTO standard. If we accept the Codex standard, we don't need to offer an explanation. If we adopt any standard which is more stringent than Codex, we will need to provide sufficient evidence to prove that we need to adopt a more stringent standard before we can protect public health. If we stick to the standard that we've adopted all along, well, that is not what they will consider. They will look at the standard that you adopt and whether or not it's more stringent than that of Codex. Why don't we just submit those standards that we have amended? For those others that we have not amended, I think we can we stick with them? In the whole consultation paper, well, that our colleagues are already going to submit them to the WTO. Well, you haven't submitted it yet. This is only a consultation paper. Also, what is important is to find out why the standard was set at 0.1 when it was set. It was set in 1983 in view of the scientific, evidence and the standards adopted by countries at the time. So, the scientific, basis adopted at the time no longer, applicable nowadays? Well, science has developed a lot since the last few decades. Many of the scientific, evidence have changed. I think Mr. Tam is asking you about the 0.1, standard for polished rice for cadmium. Can you look up the scientific, evidence in support of that standard? Well, the scientific evidence is not the same as, the trade argument. But anyway, never mind. This is only a public consultation. Perhaps, okay. It's now my turn. I'll still be addressing the same point. Of course, the DP, I'm speaking in my capacity as a member of the DP and not as the chair. I'm now using my own time. I welcome the government's proposed amendment. We have been pressing the government to do this for a long time already. 3 years ago, when I started buying vegetables and rice for inspection, and I found out that your standard for heavy metal were very outdated and too lenient. One such example would be lead. Other than lead in water, many people have been forced to drink water contaminated with lead. Food is also lead is also found in other food products such as vegetables. The standard now then was 6 milligram per kilogram. In other jurisdictions, for Codex, it's 0.1 to 0.3, milligram. between 0.1 and 6. We're talking about a difference of 60 times. So we do not amend these standards. And when the government says that the standards have not exceeded the limit to the standard, if your standard is too lenient, it would, mean disaster. So that's why I want the government to tighten the standard in respect of lead, that is 0.1 to 0.3, so that we can align with international standard. And that is a good, decision. For about 90 food products, the standard has been tightened, and we agree with that. What we are most concerned about, and I think we've talked a lot today about that as well, which is rice. Looking at the consultation paper for cadmium, Dr. Lau Shiulai said that cadmium may result in overexposure, may result in osteoporosis. It could be carcinogenic. It might hurt our, kidney. It might result in so other than the consultation paper, where we understand that you're relaxing the standard for polished rice from 0.2 to 0.1, you've also relaxed the standard for two types of rice: raw rice 0.2 to 0.1, barley 0.2 to 0.1, and for leaf vegetables again it's reduced from 0.1 to 0.2. The DP is against relaxing standards which are stringent. I've already relayed our opinion to the government already. I hope the government will consider that seriously. And for rice and vegetables, what we are most worried about is that if we relax the standard to 0.2, what may happen is that we will be in line with the mainland of China. The standard in China is 0.2. So rice that could be sold in the mainland of China, which is in compliance with mainland standard, may not be in compliance with local standard here. The Consumer Council did a study in 2003 and found 3 rice from China with a standard of 0.1 something and 0.2 something, which exceeded our standard of 0.1 for cadmium. As a result, they were not allowed to be sold here. So I'd like to ask, how many different types of rice or wheat which can be sold in Hong Kong, how many of them have been rejected because they exceeded our local standard? And according to the present amendment, will they be allowed to be sold in Hong Kong? Have you made any such assessments? Dr. Ho, according to our surveillance plan, from time to time we may discover, wheat which exceed the limit of 0.1. Do they come from mainland? Some of them come from the mainland, but some of them come from other countries as well. If we relax the limit to 0.2, would you envisage that more rice from China will be able to be sold here? Regarding the market share, it would be determined by different factors. Rice from mainland China, the quantity would vary from year to year. Previous figures suggest that about 10% of the rice in Hong Kong are from China. The main source of supply nowadays would be Vietnam and Thailand. Tanya Chen. I'm not going to follow up on the question of rice. I have the consultation paper with me. I'd like to go to page 2 and 3 of the consultation paper. I apologize for my lack of knowledge of chemistry. So according to the paper, you've conducted a dietary study, and in this study I'm more concerned about mercury. Methyl mercury. Okay, methyl mercury. In paragraph B on page 3, normally for women in Hong Kong, about 11% would be exposed to methyl mercury through their diet. Methyl mercury would have a particularly serious impact on women, and they come mainly from fish. And methyl mercury is more toxic compared. This is in footnote 7, and I note also I'm rather worried that for fish, I think you're relaxing the standard for mercury, because originally for mercury, the existing standard is 0.5 for fish. Now you're proposing that 0.5 would only apply to methyl mercury. In other words, for the most toxic mercury, there is a ceiling, but for overall speaking, for mercury, there is no ceiling. But according to your paper, mercury will have a long-term, adverse impact on pregnant women. So where is your logic here? According to your calculation, in respect of the total volume of mercury, some people say that you might inadvertently have relaxed the standard by 10%. So what is the rationale for that? You know that methyl mercury is particularly toxic. Why is it that there is no ceiling for the total volume of mercury and the ceiling only applies to methyl mercury? Under Secretary. Thank you, Ms. Chan. Earlier, some members referred to some of the amendments or changes. This time, we've taken a comprehensive look of the approach of Codex. So some of the proposed amendments are actually simply in line with the Codex practice. Perhaps Dr. Ho can further elaborate. But actually, we have several considerations. First of all, we need to align with international standards. When we look at the Codex standard, they will adopt the methyl mercury as the unit. For fish, 90% of the mercury contained in fish are methyl mercury. So we need to first of all ensure that we can align with international standard. Ms. Chen said that we should not allow the standard for predatory fish, because for pregnant women or women in childbearing age, it would have an impact. But you are relaxing it by 10% in disguise. Well, this is a technical adjustment. Our amendment, some of it would need to be in line with the international trend. If we have a good reason not to do that, I think aligning with international practice is a very important consideration. Of course, you need to align with international standard, but if you add an additional, ceiling for the total volume of mercury, I mean, why is that? They also regulate mercury at the moment. Dr. O, can you set a ceiling for methyl mercury 0.5 and then another standard for mercury? I think this is more complex. For each species of fish, the figure will be different. Normally, for normal fish, the content of methyl mercury will be about 90% of the total volume of mercury, but it varies from different species, among different species. Some will be 56%, some will be different. In the next paragraph, you also mention other species of fish which you recommend people should not eat that much. Why? Well, perhaps I should suggest that you should set two ceilings, and they may not be contradictory. I mean, that could be a better approach. But still, overall, I welcome these proposed amendments. Okay, I hope the administration will take note of Ms. Chan's comments. Also, please, could you let other members know how toxic are the other types of mercury? Next, Dr. N. Zhang. Thank you. I also welcome the proposed amendments to the regulations and setting these new standards. Some members mentioned cadmium. Again, we have reservations, especially for vegetables. The maximum level is 0.1 at the moment. You have now proposed to amend it to 0.2. I mean, we do consume lots of vegetables and rice, and you're relaxing the limit here, and this is really, controversial. For cadmium, other members already pointed out that it might result in osteoporosis. Well, that would be a serious, threat. But there are other risks that we don't know yet. Cadmium may result in, chronic poisoning, and people would cough, or may have sore throats or bone aches and so on. And many people in Hong Kong suffer from such symptoms. I mean, over the years, we've consumed so much poultry and so on that there seems to be no standard at all. Yes, for many there are no standards at all. Dr. Chang, I don't think cadmium would cause you to cough. I think Dr. Ho said that, chronic poisoning due to cadmium may result in certain symptoms that you cannot explain the cause of it. You don't have, limits for other food items like pork or beef or poultry. You have standards for fish, but there are some food items for which you have no standards. So it's a good thing that you are now proposing these amendments. But I note that for lead now, for tea leaves, we drink tea all the time. In the past, the maximum concentration level was 6. Now you are proposing to cut it down to 5. That's for lead. So what I'd like to know is why you've only, reduced it by such a small margin. What is the international standard? Dr. Ho? Now it's 0.1 to 0.3. The proposal is to reduce it to 0.1 to 0.3. The current standard is 6. No, it's 5, Madam Chair. I'm talking about lead, tea leaves, page 24. Page 24. Don't interrupt me, Chairman, if you're wrong. Dr. Ho. Thank you, Dr. Chang. In setting the standards, we basically make reference of the Codex standard. If such standards are absent, we would make reference of the standards in other jurisdictions. For tea leaves and dry chrysanthemum flowers, we'll make reference of the mailing standard. What is the international standard? There are no international standards for tea leaves. For tea leaves, there are no standard, no Codex standard for tea leaves. No, none for lead. Why do you check again before you give me an answer? Otherwise, if I'm able to find out and you couldn't, then it will be embarrassing for you.
Okay, we'll ask Dr. Ho to supplement the information. We drew a line, but 3 more members have come in. Kenneth Lau, Stephen Ho, and Tommy Chung. 3 minutes each for you, including the response. Mr. Lau. In principle, we support this because it protects public health. The public are more and more concerned about safety, and the regulation was last revised 34 years ago. There is a need to revise it so as to make sure that the standards and the food groups and the MLs are up to present-day standards. I'm more concerned about vegetables. I'd like to ask whether you have assessed that after the regulation has come in place, how many % of vegetables have fallen foul of the standard. If there's a big amount, would that affect the price of vegetables? Because it's $1 more, then it's $1 more for the public. And during consultation, how can you allow the public to understand this? And I have 2 questions. What measures do you have in order to tackle fluctuation in vegetable prices and also even a shortage of vegetables supplied to Hong Kong? And also quarantine of food, how much more manpower would you need? Undersecretary. Dr. Ho can give you the details, but I will let Mr. Lau know that vegetables and other foods are tested at the point of import, wholesale and retail as part of the regular surveillance program of the CFS. Over 60,000 samples are tested, but of course it's not just vegetables. If the samples are found to be problematic, we will publish the message. Dr. Ho, I'd like to talk about supply. We have assessed that when we set standards. The present amendment is for making the standards more stringent. But of course, there are also relaxations for vegetables. There would not be a big impact. But substandard samples may increase in number. Back to Ms. Ann Chang's question on tea leaves, I can see that that standard is the mainland standard. There is no international standard, nothing in Codex.
有冇劉議員仲有冇問？
Mr. Lau, any more questions? I was asking about inspection and quarantine, whether you need more manpower. Dr. Ho, depending on the consultation results, we'll make a decision accordingly. There are people in our department taking samples. Well, the testing will be more complicated because there will be more in-depth testing, and we're going to test more metals. After consultation, the regulation will come to the LegCo for amendments, right? When will you come back? Well, after the consultation period, the CFS and ourselves need some time to analyze the views. Then we will table this piece of subsidiary legislation. You don't know when. It depends. It depends what views we are going to collect. I hope you will come back as soon as possible, Mr. Stephen Ho. A point of order. I'd like to know when you drew the line. I was sitting here all the time. You did not draw the line. No, you were out of the room. No, I was here all the time. You did not say you would draw a line. But you only gave me 3 minutes. I read out the list for the first round, but you did not draw a line. Okay, I'm giving you the floor. Why do you say 3 minutes? Yes, 3 minutes, because we have overrun. Because you were late. I was not late. I don't understand. When I read out the list for the first round, you were not in the name list. You appeared only after that. No, I raised my hand. You should not cut 1 minute from my time. You did not raise your hand. I did not raise my hand, but you did not draw a line. Okay, I give you back your minute. This is not the way to chair the meeting. If you had said there was the drawing of the line, I would comply with it. But Mr. Ho, if you want to still waste more time, you can go on, but I'm giving you back your minute. On behalf of the DAB, I support the amendments, but I myself have some personal views. The present standards were made in 1983. The environment then was very different. Many members said that you might give people relax the standard, there would be more risk caused to the public. But then the environment was different. If you relax the standard, you have to tell the public clearly that there would not be any impact on food safety. If the relaxation means more choices and more supplies, we can consider it. Of course, the professor said that we are relaxing some standards because we are following international standards. But are those standards necessarily correct? I hope you will take the opportunity to explain that when we sometimes follow and sometimes not follow the international standards, then how do you make the decision? Say for polished rice from 0.1 to 0.2 and the same for mercury in fish. Why have you proposed to do so? Why were you so brave in making these proposals? Under Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Ho. We were trying to achieve those objectives we talked about. We hope to make the regulation more effective and also to protect public health and also to align with public standards. Under those principles, if there is a standard in Codex, we will try to follow it. In the paper, we have said that some of our standards are now being quite relaxed, but we would follow the Codex and they may be made more stringent. If there is not a standard for certain food in Codex, the CFS will look at the local food consumption pattern, the results of their previous risk assessments, and standards in other jurisdictions, especially those which have a similar dietary pattern as Hong Kong. These are the basic standards, basic principles. Then I ask two more simple questions. Since the standards were set in 1983, is it that at that time we did not conduct such in-depth studies, so there was a discrepancy? And also, as Ms. Ann Chang was talking about tea leaves, and today we are talking about rice and vegetables. Maybe in Asia, we have a similar dietary pattern. Let us look at Japan and Taiwan and the mainland and Southeast Asia and Singapore. Do they have similar standards? You should make that point. You should look at those data. Then you may be more convincing, and you may be able to make counselors more confident to allow you the relaxation. Yes, I can ask Dr. Ho to tell you more about the considerations back in 1983 and whether we have made reference to other jurisdictions. In 1983, when the standards were revised, we also took reference from the prevailing Codex standards and also standards in other jurisdictions. But at that time, the scientific data were different and international trade was different. We ourselves did not have any risk assessment data, but today we have our own data to support the adoption or otherwise of certain Codex standards for certain metal contaminants. Time is up. Other members have asked the same question, but the administration was not able to find previous data for us. They should try to do it and supplement them later. Last member, Mr. Tommy Zhang. Under Secretary, my question is very simple. Talking about food, well, from 2003, I think so much change has taken place. Whether we're talking about what we can eat, what we cannot eat. Talk about the 60s. When we were in the US, it was said that margarine was such a good food, but today we are told to eat butter, not margarine. And 30 years later, when you take another look, well, I have no particular view about that. I will not say a lot, even if the chair has not taken away a minute from me. I would not be so worked up as the very tall and handsome member from the agricultural sector. Well, since you are doing your consultation, please talk to the industry, listen to people. I don't think the Codex will be so kind as to relax standards. By the same token, you say your regulation has been effective. I agree, but I don't necessarily have to agree that you adopt Codex standards. You know, people who are so heavily built, they may die from one can of Coke, but if you look at Stephen Ho and other members who also have a large build, they are very healthy. So US people and Hong Kong people are different. We live the longest in the whole wide world, even if we are always feeling agitated. So apart from having effective regulation and aligning with world standards, I hope you will balance that against the local consumption pattern. Yes, the public places emphasis on health and food safety, but the Liberal Party always says the balance is important. Don't take away people's choices. You should allow more food to come into Hong Kong so people have more choices. Whether it is 0.1, 0.05 or 30, it's not a big problem. Why do you want to tie your own hands and limit people's choices? Why do you force the public to buy pricey stuff? I hope your colleagues and you would have an open mind in conducting this consultation. Mr. Shiu Ka-fai and myself will bring our industry with us to meet with you. I hope you will have an open mind. Please do not do anything that would affect the business environment. Undersecretary. Yes, Chair. Indeed, we have an open mind. Mr. Chung, we said that in July and August, we have fixed dates for public hearings, and then we can explain things to the public. The paper has been issued, and we will be receiving views in the next 3 months. We understand the Liberal Party is very concerned about this. We will certainly explain the situation more to you. I think Dr. Ho was doing his part in explaining what data they took reference from in preparing the consultation paper. Thank you. Mr. Chung, please note that this panel will hold a public hearing on the 3rd of July. I am aware that this only regulates food and mineral water, but Chinese herbal medicine is not included. It is not included. I hope the Bureau can let us know when you will look at metallic content in Chinese herbal medicine. Well, that is the responsibility of the Health Division. This is about food and it belongs to the Food Division. Okay, we'll have to go on to the next agenda item. We thank the CFS and the Bureau for coming. Next. We are talking about way forward for the live poultry trade in Hong Kong. We held a public hearing and we also had a discussion in the panel. The government should come back to propose a way forward. The clerk can ask the administration to come in.
presentation. Oh, 唔緊要唔緊要。你到時就真係畫線跟你睇我。OK。知啊。好。我哋今日咧。
Before the meeting, we have already received a submission from a member of public addressed to members of the panel, and it's already circulated to members. We welcome the representatives from the administration joining us for this item. Undersecretary, would you like to start? Thank you. Members. I'll make a brief remark first of all. I think in respect of the way forward for the live poultry trade, we conducted a 2-month public consultation which is already ended. During this time, we've talked to the poultry trade, the relevant, the chairman and vice chairman of the district council and other stakeholders. And on the 16th of May, members will recall that this panel also held a public hearing to listen to the views of the public. During this time, we received more than 80 submissions. And we've also received, I think we've also made a description of the views received through these submissions. Having considered the views of the public and the trade, we agree First of all, to maintain the status quo for the live poultry trade, and that we should not ban the import of live poultry and poultry and allow the sale of live poultry. And we also agree that we should introduce extra, flu vaccine for the poultry farm, and we should also have more tests and shorten the period of stay by poultry in the markets, and all these are acceptable. So regarding the segregation between humans and poultry at the point of sale, and also the way forward for the Cheung Sha Wan poultry wholesale market, the views received are divergent. So we will explore the different options, in the course of which we will listen to more views from the trade and we'll liaise with them and work out the direction. We hope that we'll be able to come up with a feasible and practicable solution. Thank you. I'd like to ask how many members would like to speak on this item. We have Chu Ka-fai, Tommy Jiang, Tanya Chen. Anyone else? Stephen Ho and myself. Anyone else? If not, I'm going to draw a line here, Mr. Ho. Anyone else who would like, any member, joining us, coming in after we've drawn the line, we'll try our best to accommodate the questions, but we may not be able to allow, as much time. 4 minutes each member. Mr. Siu Ka-fai. Regarding this paper, I understand that the department will allow live poultry to be sold in Hong Kong, and I welcome that. Regarding the details, for example, how we're going to segregate, humans from poultry, how we can have measures to enhance safety, while at the same time enabling the poultry trade to survive, are all important. I understand. I have frequent meetings with the live poultry trade, and they would also agree that we should have segregation between people and the poultry. And the question is whether or not all the poultry stores can do that. And even if they can, it may cost a lot of money to actually, come up with the arrangements, and the stores are not able to sell many poultry per day, so they're already finding it very difficult to survive. So if the government could come up with some subsidies to help the trade to enhance the safety, while ensuring that they are able to survive. Any response from the administration? Well, you're correct, Mr. Seo. We're also concerned about the segregation between humans and poultry. When we received some views from, we also received similar views from the trade. Our colleagues from the FXG also found that the sizes of different retail outlets and the location is such that different approaches could be taken to ensure segregation. Because for some stores, it may be easier for them to do that, while it's more difficult for others. The FXG is now liaising with them to find out if we want to segregate, ensure there is segregation, how it could be done. We haven't come to the stage yet as to how much it would cost to retrofit the stores and so on. If we could come up with simple solutions, it would be best. But for cases which are more complicated, we will consider what the next step should be. My second question is that in your report, you say that for the local farms and poultry from local farms in the mainland, I'm not saying that the risk of the poultry from mainland is higher, but there was a period of time there was a period for more than 20 months for which live poultry from China were not able to come to Hong Kong. Or sometimes the policies in the mainland are not the same as those in Hong Kong. So perhaps the Bureau should send officials to have meetings with the counterparts in the mainland so that you can find solutions to problems that cannot be resolved, so that poultry from the mainland could be sold in Hong Kong again. Under Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Siu. For the poultry trade, they would very often approach us, and through members sometimes we have also had meetings with them. So we understand their concerns. Our colleagues in the FHD in the last couple of years have had very close liaison with the counterparts in the mainland to find out what is the cause of the problem. But we must also understand that the import of live poultry from live chicken from the mainland is a business activity. So we'll try our best to find out from them when we'll be able to import live chicken again from the mainland. At the same time, we understand that this business behavior, and if they don't let the chicken to be exported to Hong Kong, there's not much we can do. If there is a way for which we can work together without jeopardizing public health, we certainly would be willing to move forward. Do I have a second round? You have to wait, Mr. Siu. I'll be quick so that Mr. Siu can. I'll be very brief. I'll be very brief. I support the paper, but still, for the live chicken in the local farms, I think you can increase the numbers. I've criticized your secretary many times. Now that he's not here, it seems I'm speaking against his back. I think he has difficulty liaising with his counterparts in the mainland. I hope the new secretary and the CE for the next administration will try to open more doors and communicate better with the mainland. We now have problems in respect of freshwater crabs and chicken. Although I am not very happy with York Chow, but still he has done a better job communicating with the mainland. So I hope you will adopt a two-pronged approach for local chicken and mainland chicken. I just want the people to have more choices so the chicken wouldn't be so expensive and the traders would find it easier to survive. At Cheung Sha Wan, there is a wholesale market. The Bureau wants to move the wholesale market to a more remote place in the new territories. People in the trade said that this will increase the transportation cost. And the drivers may not park the trucks in the farms and park them elsewhere, and that this might pose a risk. And if the poultry market is relocated to such a remote place, and you don't allow them, some buffer space, then the chicken from the mainland will not be able to be imported into Hong Kong. So would that be a buffer zone? I think you need to consider that seriously. And for the people in the trade, some of them are really very disappointed. Or a few years ago, you said that it would be the last time, and but for more than 20 months, chicken is not allowed to be imported from mainland, and they are paying rent, and yet not doing any business at all. So if some of these traders want to surrender the licenses, would there be any possibility of compensation and so on? For other poultry than chicken, again, they've not been imported from the mainland for a long time. Even for pigeons. Although there are pigeon farms in Zhuhai, which is operated by a Hong Kong citizen, but again, the pigeons from that farm is not allowed to come to Hong Kong. And I think you will need to talk to the State Quarantine and Inspection Bureau. So The people in trade also asked whether or not you would allow people to raise pigeons in Hong Kong. Under Secretary, thank you, Mr. Siu and Mr. Jiang, for your suggestions. About the Cheung Sha Wan wholesale market, although the consultant also has a recommendation, he suggests that we need to relocate the wholesale market. But I think it all boils down to whether or not the Development Bureau could provide a suitable alternative site. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to relocate. So we'll need to liaise with the Development Bureau as to whether or not we need to go to Futayao. We still need to talk to the Development Bureau before we can make a decision. We understand the concern of the trade. Thank you. Just one more point. In future, for live chicken, we hope there could be more. There could be more retail outlets. Our time is up, Mr. Siu. Tanya Chan. So what will you be doing next? I understand that there are two options you mentioned in paragraph 14 and 15. In paragraph 16, you say you will continue to explore different options. My understanding is that in the short term, the temporary wholesale market in Cheung Sha Wan will not be relocated for the time being. And if that's the case, I would like to know whether, of course, you said some of the people in the trade are very, dispirited. They want to surrender the licenses. For local chickens, Mr. Wong, who put in a submission, said that for some of the safety measures, including the vaccines and the influenza test, they have proven to be effective. So under safe circumstances, would you consider allowing the people to raise chicken in local farms or even pigeons? Would it be possible to allow them to increase the quantity of such poultry they raise? Thank you, Ms. Chan. Talking about our work going forward. Now, basically, this is actually in line with the 5 proposals to the consultant regarding vaccines, pre-sale testing, and shortening the stay at wholesale markets. All these could be implemented immediately. There are 2 points, however, which we need to take longer. First of all, the segregation between humans and the poultry, and also relocating the Cheung Sha Wan wholesale market.
It is a proposal, but the Development Bureau must be able to give us a site first. We'll continue the discussion with them, and of course, the industry don't want to have it relocated to a far-off place. We have to balance different interests. It is not easy to find a suitable location, but we'll continue to work on it. And what about local husbandry? Yes, we have to be mindful about the environment and also the food chain. I understand you can check the source, but if we can have animal husbandry in Hong Kong producing our own fresh produce, it is something good. Well, you are segregating chicken from humans at the retail level. But if it is safe and secure, can we have more chicken reared in Hong Kong? Okay, can we have more chicken reared in Hong Kong? At present, how many chicken can we produce? 1.3 million. My understanding is, well, perhaps my colleagues can add in a moment. My understanding is that we have not used the capacity to full. What is the capacity? The paper says that you can have up to 2 million. Is that right? Can I ask my colleagues to add? Mr. Wong, thank you for the question. As Professor Chan said, we have 29 local farms, and they are producing 1.3 million chickens. Every farm is given an upper limit of chickens they can keep. At present, we are producing 4 million chickens every year, but they are only using up to 80% of the capacity, and they are already satisfying market demand. Next member, Stephen Ho. 1.3 million, yes. If there is one more, we have to kill it. But, of course, we have to leave some space at every farm, and the upper limit is distributed amongst the 29 farms. All farms have to leave a margin. So you have some room for maneuver. I hope the administration understands this. Now, why do you say we satisfy market demand? It is just because there are 131 stalls. I believe the entire chain for supplying fresh chicken should be planned again. In 2007, you asked people to surrender licenses. That was because there was a special incident and you suddenly rolled out a policy. But in fact, that policy was not well thought out. I'd like to take the opportunity to say that if you are going to keep the live poultry trade, we should not only look at it from a regulatory angle. Wherever it is safe, we should in fact develop it. I think you should have a different mindset. There are 131 permits for killing chicken, but can we allow people in new development areas to also buy fresh chicken? Well, if you can expand the market, I'm sure we can use the 20% reserve capacity. And I believe you should adjust the volume of the trade appropriately. Second, about the relocation of the wholesale market. Well, you can't please everybody all the time. Hong Kong people may be too panicky about avian flu. Well, there are migratory birds coming into Hong Kong, bringing the virus of H7N9 or H5N1 into Hong Kong. That is a risk, of course. But can the public accept the risk? It is not that whenever there is a chicken farm, there must be H7N9. You have to do promotion and clarify for the public that the public can accept a chicken farm nearby. There cannot be any improvement of facilities in the wholesale market if it is not relocated. You go to the wholesale market, it's just a piece of land. There is a machine to wash chicken cages and an office. It doesn't do anything other than wholesaling. But if you have a new place for it, there may be more functions. That may be possible. But given the present market, it is not possible to add on to it in any way. Number 3, the 131 chicken killing licenses. Can that be increased? These were the remaining ones. And you can only allow the license to be passed to direct relatives. But if you want to develop the trade, you must adjust the system. And if you auction new licenses, meaning if people think the trade can be developed, then they will be forthcoming in injecting impetus into the trade instead of just allowing the trade to exist. Therefore, you should re-examine the entire system. I understand you have concerns about avian flu, but whenever it is safe, you should do the promotion. This is the point of my remark. Is there a question? Well, I think this has come too fast. I think we were talking about live poultry also at the last meeting, and now you already tell us the public consultation. Well, he doesn't require a response because it is the time is up. It's my turn. I think you have been marking time only. You have been going in circles. I don't think you are making progress, but you have spent a lot of money on the consultant. I have a few questions. Number 1. The Chengsha temporary poultry wholesale market. We have been there. I, of course, understand what Mr. Ho is saying. There are not really any facilities. We believe there is a high vacancy rate. Not a lot of live poultry is imported from the mainland. You say you are not going to ban it. But there are no chickens coming into Hong Kong from Guangdong because they have the flu outbreak there, and they have chosen not to export chicken into Hong Kong. What is the utilization rate now at Chengsha? How much of the land is used? The DP would like you to relocate it ASAP. The Shamshui-Pu DC came, and at this panel, we endorsed a motion to ask you to remove the market as soon as possible. It was quite remote before, but now there is a Lai Chi Kok MTR station, and public housing is found around the station. I believe there should be rezoning of the land, and you should not be very passive. Are you only waiting for the Development Bureau to give you a piece of land? What is the relocation plan like? Thank you, Chair. And it's said that the market is by and large vacant. The AFCD can comment on the situation. But as for relocation, we are looking for a place very actively with the Development Bureau. Mr. Wong. Chairman, I do not have the tenancy rate for the wholesale market. In fact, many stalls have been rented out. Some wholesalers might have dealt in mainland chickens, and they are not ending their tenancy, even if there are no chickens coming in from Guangdong now. But there may not be any trading at those stalls. In the past year or so, there are no mainland chickens coming into Hong Kong. Are they just paying rent but not doing business? Asked the chairman. Well, yes. But some of them are transforming now, but not everyone. Can you give us the information later? How many stalls are rented out? How many are wholesalers dealing in mainland chicken, and how many are wholesaling local farm produce? Okay, yes, we can supplement the information. And then there is another question. We have this policy now to preserve live poultry, but there is a price to pay, and that is epidemic control and government resources. At Mancam To, you are doing the serology test and the quick test. How much money is used every year on that, so as to allow Hong Kong people to continue their culinary preference for live chicken? Chairman, in fact, I was trying to also supplement this point. Well, we have read the consultant report. You may think that we have just marked time, but in the interim, we have gave consideration to many things, and we also considered the views of many people before we make this decision. On the one hand, the risk of avian flu is here, but the administration has plowed in resources to do testing, and still there is a risk, and that is why we are talking about segregating chickens and humans. If you are talking about developing the trade with a lot of effort, well, no, that will not be the case, because we are still trying to strike a balance between avian flu risk and the supply of live poultry in Hong Kong. As for resources, can I defer to Mr. Wong? I think the question was asked last time, and we already supplemented the information. But briefly, in 2015-16, we used about $49.5 million in order to tackle the avian flu risk. And the FEHD did testing at Mancam To, and we also conducted regular inspection at local farms. On that, we spent $13.5 million in the year. So altogether, it is about $60 million for 2015-16. And in 2017-18, it is about $67 million. Combining the two departments. What is the government subsidy for each live chicken? It is not that all this is spent for the purposes of retail, because especially for AFCD, their monitoring of avian flu, they are not only looking at live poultry for eating. Part of their work is such that even if there is no live poultry in Hong Kong, they would still do it. Like, they would pick up dead birds on the streets and they would do testing on them. In fact, the AFCD would pick up over 10,000 dead birds in our streets every year, and they will test each bird to see if they have been affected or infected with avian flu. But it only costs a little. Is that right? We did not give any particular breakdown for these figures. If we do not have a live poultry policy, we'll be able to save $60 million a year. But as I just said, within the $60 million, there is the work of regular protection or prevention of avian flu. We did not have a breakdown of how much is spent only on live poultry. Okay, after the line was drawn, one more member raised his hand, and that's Dr. K.K. Kwok. We'll allow you to ask questions. Are there other members who would like to ask questions? If not, 4 minutes for K.K. Kwok. Thank you, Chair. A short one. The government spent a lot of money on the consultant. I don't understand what that is for. Because we are keeping the same policy. Well, if we want to give up live poultry, then we will have a permanent segregation of humans and chickens. That is quite clear to the medical and scientific sectors. You still have to consider it in the end. But now we have achieved no progress. In the market, you allow live poultry to be sold. And in the paper, I can't see clear guidelines and methodologies. Maybe you require the store owners to do something, or you help them, and individual markets are doing their own trick to segregate humans and poultry. But I think there is a lot of room for the government to act here.
For the Chensuan wholesale market, member representing trade said that they will not object to relocation. I think that would give the administration the space so that it would be able to reduce the risk of an outbreak of avian flu within the urban areas. And this is something you can do. Thirdly, I don't think the government can simply stay put if you still allow the sale of live chicken. Then you must come up with a more proactive policy so that at the present, retail outlets, there are, certain standards that people can follow. You just can't let them be. And secondly, for the local poultry, industry, the risk is smaller compared with the mainland. There is always a bigger risk in the mainland. Why can't the government do this? Of course, there are no import of chicken from the mainland at the moment. But as a matter of policy, why can't you allow the local poultry farms to expand the capacity so that we can stop importing chicken from the mainland? I think if you impose a total ban on chicken from mainland, that is one way to minimize the risk. I think the Bureau is also promoting, the sustainable development of organic, farming. So, well, thank you, Dr. Kwok, for the question. Although we still, maintain the supply of live chicken, but we hope also try to our best to strike the balance and minimize the risk of an outbreak. There are measures we are already implementing which are not controversial, and you may not, be aware of that. For example, shortening the period of stay of the minor poultry in the wholesale market. That can help reduce the risk. And also the pre-sale avian influenza test, that we could do a better job in that respect. We will certainly step up our effort in those areas. But there are 2 points which will take longer. The first one Dr. Kwok mentioned is the segregation between chicken and humans. The paper has not dwelt too much on this point. Our colleagues at the FHG is now discussing with the trade. Segregation between chickens and human is a principle that we support. We want to be able to do it. As to how we can do it, should we have an agreement on the approach? Apparently not. Do the stores have to be, by the same standard? The trade has different views. The FEC is now talking to them. So after we've, come up with an agreed option, we will report to members. As for the relocation of the Cheung Sha Wan wholesale market, as Mr. Siu Ka Fai and other members have already mentioned that if we were to relocate the wholesale market to a remote area, the trade would object. So we would need to actively, talk to the Development Bureau to see whether or not we can find a site for relocation which the trade also accept. So this is something that we need to do. As for chicken from the mainland, looking at the history of the previous outbreak of the avian flu, both local chicken and mainland chicken had been affected by avian flu before, and it's not just chicken from the mainland. So live chicken. So this time, we do not have any evidence to suggest that we need to ban the import of live chicken from the mainland. Many of the members of the trade importing poultry from the mainland have urged us to liaise more with the mainland. For the past 1 or 2 years, no live chicken have been imported into Hong Kong from the mainland, and they would like us to resume the import of such chicken, and we certainly do that. Under Secretary, do you plan to talk to the mainland authorities and suggest that they allow live chicken to be imported in Hong Kong? Will you be fighting for that, or would you be in a passive position? Would you say that it doesn't really matter if they don't export live chicken in Hong Kong, we allow the local farms to raise more chicken? Well, in the past, we allow different quantities of live chicken, supply from mainland and the local farms. We don't have any live chicken from the mainland at the moment. We try to find out why. Well, we understand it is a business decision on their part. Well, for this business behavior, is it because they have problems in containing the epidemic there? Of course, we would talk to them. If there is an outbreak of an epidemic, we would know. But usually, the risk of avian flu, the risk is not just in the mainland, it's present elsewhere, also in Hong Kong. So I'm sure the mainland is also very concerned about the risk of an outbreak of the avian flu. All right, with that, we can wrap up our discussion on this item. I'd like to thank the representative from the AFCD and the FHD for attending our discussion on this item. We have one more item on the agenda today, which is the survey results on prices of fresh food items in public markets and other retail outlets. Again, there will be a PowerPoint presentation. Again, is the Undersecretary. We'll invite the other officials join us for this item. The administration recently published the findings of their survey. Could the administration brief us on the findings? Public markets play a very important part in the livelihood of the people. That's why we're always concerned about the subject of public markets. different organizations have conducted surveys on prices in different markets. Many members of the public believe that the goods sold in markets managed by the FHD are cheaper. In fact, the tenants of the FHD manage markets and freely set the prices. It's a business, decision, and there is no regulation by the government. Other than the FHD regulated public markets, when members of the public procure live groceries, they can go to the supermarkets and other markets to find out about the different factors which affect retail prices. Earlier on, the FHG engaged a consultant to conduct a study to find out about the goods sold through different channels, to find out about the prices, and find out for the prices of fresh food products, how is that related to the rents charged at these markets managed by the FHG. I'll now invite the officials to brief members on the findings of the survey. Okay, we can take a look at the findings of the survey. There are some background information which are familiar to members. Let's take a look at find out about the 4 channels we looked at. First of all, the FHD markets, the linked markets, supermarkets, and neighborhood grocery stores. For the linked markets, and the FHG managed markets, we selected markets in 22 districts. We selected the more, the busier markets. What about the linked markets? We would find the nearest linked market to a market managed by the FHG. But we have fewer linked markets on Hong Kong Island. But we would try to cover as much of these linked markets. In areas where there are more linked markets, we will survey more than 1. For supermarkets, we will cover 2 to 3, such as Welcome, Parking Shop, and Wango. For other retail outlets, we will cover 7 such outlets so that we will be able to cover more food items. So how many types of food products have we surveyed? We covered a total of 31 fresh provisions, including pork, beef, chicken, freshwater and seawater fish, fresh vegetables, fruits, eggs, and tinned food. In making the comparison, we tried our best to compare likes with likes. For canned food, we try to compare the same units. For imported items, we would exclude them. For eggs, again, we will try to sample eggs from China and the mainland. Next, how do we collect our samples? We collected such price data through the so-called mystery customers. So one can see that the prices could be, for example, catties for about how many dollars per catty and so on. For pork, we would ask the vendor how much the price would be. The survey would be done during the peak hours from 8 to 11:15 from the 5th of September to 9th of October. We collected a sample of 18,000 valid price records, 9,000 from FHD, and the others in total only 19. You would ask, are we overbiased towards the FHD markets? Actually, we covered all the markets. We've covered all the stores in the linked markets. You may want to ask how many FHD market stores have we covered. It's about 16,000 odd and 452 for the linked market stores. So the ratio is 9.3.3. That's the ratio. And this is the price comparison. We adopted 3 methods: the overall approach, the neighborhood difference approach, and the neighborhood ranking approach. The overall approach is simpler. Let's take a look at the first one. There are 11 food items here. Pork, it's $50 for the FXG markets. Previously, there were 1,500 odd valid price records. We add up all the records divided by 1,200. We arrive at the average of $50. You find some colors here. The red color represent the channels which is most expensive. For fresh lean pork, $50.30 for supermarkets, $50 for FXG. For the cheapest price, we use the blue color, so it's $44 for neighborhood stores. So you find more red brackets columns for the supermarkets and more blue columns for the neighborhood retail outlets. Next would be freshwater and seawater fish, and again the red column represents the most expensive prices, which would be the supermarket, and then the neighborhood fresh fruit retail outlet would be the cheapest. And finally, fruits and eggs and tin food, again the situation is similar. And the next one would be the overall situation. And we put together the 4 different channels and we would rank them together. You'll find that for the FXG markets, for 5 food products, the prices are the highest. For 17 items, they rank second. For 7, they rank third. And there are 2 food products for which they are the cheapest at the FXG markets. There are 2 other methods we adopted: the neighborhood difference approach and the neighborhood ranking approach. The neighborhood difference approach is simpler. We take a look at the FXG market and the linked market. We want to find out whether there are any food items for which they are 10% more expensive than the others. For the FXG market, for which the prices are more than 10% higher, for the first group, for comparing FXG and linked markets, for linked FXG markets, there are more items where they are 10% more expensive. And for supermarkets, there are more cases where the prices are more than 10%. Comparing FXG market with neighborhood stores, again, you find more items which are more expensive for the FXG markets. So there might be some discrepancy, minor discrepancy, but the trend is the same. Next, the neighborhood ranking approach. Of the 31 items, we took out a sample of 16 items. We want to cover those areas where all these 4 channels are present before we make the comparison. We would give a ranking of 4 for the most expensive and 1 for the least expensive. The highest the score, the more expensive the price. And the outcome is that for those scoring more than 3 points, 7, there will be 7 for FXG and 9 for the which rank in the middle. And so overall summary, for the FXG markets, we cannot come to the conclusion that they are particularly the cheapest.
The last comparison is the relationship between prices and rent. We have given you some examples here. Say, for example, the spiced pork cubes. The most common price is $12 each. And in fact, the hirers are paying $242 or $1,050 per square meter, so a difference of 4 times. And then another one, corn. The average price is $6 per stick, but the tenants are paying difference in rent up to 431 times. And if we take an overall look, we can look at the rent difference amongst markets. Let us look at potato. In Western District, the rent difference is 2.8 times, Kowloon City 2 times, and Tai Po 43 times. That's all for my presentation. Thank you. Under Secretary, you'd like to say something? Well, yes, let me summarize the report. Looking at the survey, the FEHD markets are not necessarily the cheapest. And in the same FEHD market, even if the same commodity is sold at the same price, the tenants are actually paying very different rents. We can see, therefore, that rent levels have no direct relationship with prices of food, and the rent is not the only deciding factor for food prices. But the government is very concerned about public markets, so are members, and so are members of the public. Therefore, in 2015, we did this survey, and in fact, in 2015, we also engaged a consultant to see how public markets can be revitalized, because at that time there was a subcommittee on market affairs. And now we are going to improve the hardware in 6 public markets. And if there are tenants supporting it, we will retrofit the markets with air conditioning. Members are also concerned whether there will be new public markets. In the policy address this year, we have said that in Tung Chung New Town, and also in the CDA, and also in Hong Shui QNDA, we have already identified sites in order to build public markets of a certain scale, and we'll consider building public markets in other NDAs. We'll also modernize and revitalize public markets. And a comprehensive review will be done. The review scope will not be limited to hardware, but will look at the operation or management mode as well. To show our determination, we consulted the panel in April, and we proposed to set up a task force headed by a D2 officer in order to coordinate the review, so he can supervise the implementation of all improvement measures. At the ESC, we will seek your support to create that post in order to set up the task force. Thank you. Members who would like to ask questions should raise their hands now. I'll read out the names. Lau Siu Lai, Kwok Wai Keung, Ray Chan, and myself. Any more? Any more members? Stephen Ho, Ben Chan. Any more? If not, I'll draw a line there. We'll take this item to 5 to 5.
咁我哋嗱，大家準時就每人連問連答4分鐘。
Let us keep to the time, 4 minutes for each. Lau Siu Lai. Thank you, Chair. I thank the Bureau for doing this detailed survey. But in the analysis framework and sampling, I think there is quite a major blind spot, and I'd like you to explain. Because your sampling method is such that you go to FEHD markets, and in certain districts there are link markets, but sometimes the link market is not there. And according to the food prices, you have done some comparison. However, if that's the case, your discussion would be based on a competitive environment and the distribution of prices amongst the markets. Well, I can see a difference of prices, but the difference is not big. However, yes, you have done a detailed survey. However, the framework is a comparison of prices where there is competition. I think the public are more concerned about where there is no competition. Prices can be extreme. Say there are news reports saying that in Tung Chung, we only have a link market and there are no FEHD markets. The news report has said that the prices are even more expensive than those in Wan Chai by 30%. There is this blind spot in your report because you have not looked at situations where there is no competition. If there are no FEHD markets and neighborhood retail outlets, link markets are selling food at high prices. And also there is no breakdown about rent paid in link markets. what are the difficulties faced by the stallholders? Now, of course, this is something that is outside the purview of your survey, but I hope very much to see a survey on the market tenants. But there is this blind spot that link markets may be very expensive when there is no competition. There is no competition in Tin Shui Wai and Tung Chung. There are just supermarkets or link markets. Did you take samples? Can I ask the consultant to say something about sampling? MVA. Okay, let me add. The starting point is FEHD market. As I said in my presentation, we identified 22 vibrant FEHD markets. You may know that in certain districts there may not be an FEHD market. But we started with places where there are FEHD markets, and then we look for link markets in the vicinity. But the member's question is different from the purpose of this survey. Well, exactly. I am saying that there is this gross deficiency in this survey. I hope the Bureau will do another survey later into the average rent paid by link market tenants. And perhaps the most difficulty is not faced by the public but the tenants in link markets. Thank you, Chair. Talking about rent, we don't have information now on link rent, but our understanding is that FEHD market rents are lower because of historical reasons. However, we can see that rent levels have nothing to do with food prices. Well, but Under Secretary, Ms. Lausulai has made a point, and also I have also pointed out an important blind spot, because in collecting data, you are not collecting data from link markets when there is not an FEHD market or a supermarket nearby. You do not have such data. This is only your inference. You use FEHD markets as the basis, and your survey may be misleading. This is a very serious point. Yes, Chairman, may I just add one word? Because the entire survey is premised on a slanted basis, because you are only comparing prices where there is competition. But if you look at link markets where there is monopoly, we'd like to know exactly what the monopoly is like. I have just received a motion proposed by Mr. Kwok Wai Keung. This is related to the topic under discussion. After we have had our questions and answers session, we'll decide whether to process the motion. Next member, Kwok Wai Keung. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman, for assigning time for this motion. The LegCo is asking the administration to build FEHD markets in order to resist monopoly of link market, and we have asked for freezing rent in FEHD markets. And right at this time, they released the survey results. I think they have ulterior motives. And there are so many blind spots. And we are questioning whether you are deliberately distorting the situation so you can delay building FEHD markets. You have chosen Java Road Market and Yutong Market on the Hong Kong Island district. One is in Shau Kei Wan, one is in North Point mid-levels. Well, in Yutong, there are only 10-odd stalls, but in Java Road, there are hundreds. Well, we used to have North Point Estate, but now there are only private residential buildings, and so they are selling better stuff. However, there is no air conditioning, and the stallholders are having a difficult time. And yet you are releasing a report to say that it is expensive I think it's unfair. And also, you have chosen vibrant FEHD markets and you have chosen less frequented link markets, and so you are not comparing like with like. I must also point out that in certain districts, like in Tinshui, Tongchong, Ma'anshan, and Changquan'ou, link markets monopolize the situation. There is no comparison possible. We are asking you to build FEHD markets so that there will not be a monopoly by link market, because if the monopoly takes shape, today they may be inexpensive, but tomorrow they can increase prices as they like. Why don't you take a route of prevention? Do not play tricks. According to the motion, do something which is meaningful. Do some comparative studies. Undersecretary, thank you, Mr. Kwok. Thank you for the view, but I must clarify that this survey is not a trick. We want to allow members to understand that we can compare prices at FEHD markets and other markets. And even in these districts, there is no necessary relationship between prices and rents. And we are not trying to delay the building of new markets. We have already said that in Tongchong and Hongshui-Q, we are going to build new markets. And we'll also consider other NDAs and provide them with markets. We are continuing to do that. And there is progress. As for the survey here, you say there are data that are lacking and you have criticism against it. I think this is because we have set certain objectives for the survey. We did not deliberately cook up the figures. That is for clarification, please. And this is only the first step. We know you are very concerned about markets. You want new markets in NDAs. Apart from the consultant report saying there should be improvement in the hardware in 6 markets, we understand that there is also a requirement to improve the hardware, meaning management in markets. So there will be a comprehensive survey, and we are going to secure new resources in order to add people so we can build a better environment in the markets. We are determined to do a good job. I hope members will understand this major premise. Thank you.
Mr. Ray Chen, thank you. Actually, the comparison of food prices amongst these markets, many livelihood concern groups have done this already. Their conclusion was that the findings were not really very reflective of the actual situation. Take tomatoes, for example, there are different qualities of tomatoes, different prices. So have you really, taken this into consideration? The Bureau is very happy to see the conclusion there is no direct bearing between rents and prices. Otherwise, if we see a bigger discrepancy between these linked markets and FEHD managed markets, we'll have more grounds to ask the government to build more markets. So, otherwise, do we need to introduce price control? You say the situation now is the best, is the most satisfactory. There is no direct correlation between rents payable by the stores and the prices they charge. So you're saying that even if you build more markets, there's no way you may not necessarily be able to lower the prices of in the linked markets. I think we're still facing the same blind spot. I think in your study, you need to compare the linked markets, the private markets, and the public markets managed by the FEHD. In districts where there are few public markets, then you wouldn't be able to make a valid comparison. Take places like Trengganu, Monshan, Tingshuai, and Tongcheng, you have this situation. So if you were to conduct another study again, I think you should take out the markets from these districts and compare them. I think you should be comparing Tongcheng markets with those in Chunwan, because right now there are shuttle buses taking people to buy the groceries in Chunwan. So I think that can more accurately reflect the pressure which the public face when they need to make buy the groceries. Perhaps the consultant can explain whether they have taken samples of different, taking samples of products of different qualities. If I may elaborate here, for tin food, for example, that's easier. You have imported tin food with, simplified Chinese characters. That's not covered in a sample. In the survey, we also gave instruction to the surveyors. What about the same brand of fried days in salted beans? That's one thing. What about vegetables, where the range of quality could be very diverse? For imported products and organic products, the guideline we give, the instruction we give is that they should not be included in our sample. We also have a mechanism to look at the prices to see whether or not they are beyond the CNSD range. Because every food item, we would get a range of the prices. If it goes beyond that range, we'll double check to see whether there's a problem. Well, several members also ask about those districts where there's no competition from public markets. Will you conduct another study for those areas? Will you conduct a supplementary study for those areas where there is no competition? Of course, we've heard members' views. We certainly go back and look at that. For this survey is only part of our review. In the course of the review, we will look at the kind of information we need. The important thing is that we want to be able to set up a team as soon as possible to take a look at this issue. And now it's my turn. I would like to put forward my request. I would demand that the government should conduct a follow-up study. We understand that some important data is lacking. In your sampling, you have not cover those areas where there is no competition, namely areas which are monopolized by link markets or supermarkets. You've not, studied whether or not whether the prices of food products in those areas are particularly high. Or you only take samples from the FHD markets and then pick markets in its vicinity for comparison. That is your blind spot. What the public is concerned about is that they don't have any choice. If they're in that particular district, there are only linked markets or other markets. So would that affect their choice when making buying the groceries? So I think you need to make a supplementary study that whether you want to do it yourself, the FHD, or engage a consultant again is not the most important. Not only have you not covered those areas where there are monopolies, you've not selected markets directly managed by the housing department as well. In fact, in many housing estates, the markets are managed directly by the housing department, or the housing department might have outsourced the management to a contractor like the Hygiene estate. The market could be directly managed by the housing department or outsourced to a contractor. We don't know about the situation in those markets. Are the prices of food sold in those markets higher than those of FHC markets or link market or what? Why have you not covered those markets in your survey? Madam Chair, the FHD, when they conducted this study through the consultant, I think the main purpose is to focus on the FHD managed markets. What we're saying is that we want to improve the markets managed by the FHD. So both the hardwares and softwares have been looked at. we understand that the community is very concerned about the prices of groceries, but for the FXT, they cannot control the prices of the food products. So the premise of the study this time is that we want to make some improvements. In the past, whether it's the market subcommittee or also many members and the public have told us that the markets managed by the FHT would need to be improved both in terms of hardwares and softwares. And that's why we will be deploying more manpower. We will try our best to improve the hardware and the softwares. For the markets managed by the Link and the Housing Department, they are not covered in the review of the FHD. It's not the focus of the review. Good. So we hope that the data and the findings are accurate and indeed have reference value, and that they will not be biased. That's why I asked whether or not you will conduct a supplementary study. Next, Mr. Stephen Ho. Thank you. First of all, I think this report is entirely, biased towards the FXG markets. Please forgive us for thinking like that, because every time you put forward a suggestion, as the chart you showed us, you have 4 columns, the red being the most expensive, the blue being the cheapest. For the FX market, most of them would have no color. Apparently, you are hiving off the market. You say for the FX market, they're not the most expensive. For 17 items, they rank second. So the impression you give is that you are actually biased in favor of the FX markets. And secondly, I think the public is, although you say there's no direct correlation between rents and prices, it's basically a question of supply and demand. Your survey covered the FX market, and you compared it against the Link market, but the distance between them are not close. I grew up in the New Territories. It takes 20 minutes to walk from an FX market to the Sunway market. So each market will serve the customers within the radius of 800 meters. So you call that, within the neighborhood, it's wrong. And secondly, the customer habit. So I think people would like to go to a market within a distance of 800 meters. And normally, I would like to be able to go to a market in the vicinity after I finish with work. And thirdly, I would want to go to a market where I could park, and that is where what Sunway Market is like that. There's a car park next to the market. So different markets are different. So your study findings will not be able to really reflect the real situation. I don't mind your survey dividing the markets into 4 categories, but you will need to look at the coverage of these markets, the supply, the total number of households in the market, how many stores are selling food products in that district, how many stores are selling pork, on average how many households do they serve. Only then would you be able to find out the impact on price or supply. If a particular seller thinks that a particular product is not viable, they will not sell that product anymore. If they can make more profit selling pork, they will sell pork. If they can make more profit selling fried rice, then they would do that. They will not sell those which will only give them a very small profit. So I hope this can be fully reflected in your report. Don't give the impression that, like the other member said, the government just increased the prices of products sold in FX markets. Don't give the impression that you come up with this report because you don't want to build more FX markets. Under Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Ho. Well, as I said, when we conducted the study, the premise was that we want to find out how we can improve the markets managed by the FXG. So we need to focus on the FXG markets. It just so happened it was just so happened that it was a matter of timing that we found, the finding found that there's no correlation between the rents payable by the stores and the prices they charge. So members may have their own impression or conclusions reading the findings, but the findings, by the consultant are a statement of the facts. Now, but in our overall review, we will take a look again at members' views and see how we can do a better job. But I'd like to also recap that the other markets were not the focus of our study this time. We understand members' concern, but about this report. But the purpose of the study mainly was to compare the prices of products sold in FXG markets and other markets. Well, since we are about to we're near the scheduled time for us to adjourn, I'd like to exercise my discretion as the chair to extend the meeting by 15 minutes. We have Mr. Chen Hong-ban, and for second round, Dr. Lau Siu-lai and myself. I'm going to allow only 2 minutes for each member for the second round, and then we'll deal with Mr. Kwok's motion. 2 minutes each for the second round, and then we'll deal with Mr. Kwok Wai-keung's motion. So we should be able to finish in 15 minutes. Mr. Chen Hong-ban? Thank you. I think there is a premise for this report. It is basically done, for the sake of the FXD markets. I dare not say that the findings are not fair, but I think but I don't know how many of the figures are valid. If you include prices which are particularly expensive, and in the end you work out the average, so is that average a valid way to make a comparison? So that's the first point. Secondly, when one shop for groceries, one would compare prices, one will also consider other factors. For example, you would want to look at the quality of the products, where the country of origin of the products, and whether or not the vendor will give you the full quantity or the weight, and whether or not the vendor is substituting the genuine product with, other things. And recently, we've seen the food products sold by shops. There are many. A single shop could sell products which you would buy in half the supermarket. When the shop sells so many different products, although the rents they pay appear to be very expensive, but given that they sell so many different types of products, they are able to sell them at a cheaper price because of the volume. But for the FXD markets, every store, you have a vegetable store only selling vegetables, and if they sell anything else, they'll be arrested. So I don't think you can just make a direct comparison like that.
If possible, can you tell me whether your data have covered extreme cases? When you collected data, some items might be very expensive and others very cheap. Did you discount those extreme examples before you did an objective comparison? I could see the neighborhood ranking approach, but we only have the average figure. It's difficult for me to do an in-depth comparison. If you apply different sampling and calculating methods, you will end up with very different results. I will not say for sure that this is the case for every HD market and also for Link or for supermarkets because of the survey, because at different times, at different stages, and if the food is in a different category, sometimes you look at a neighborhood market, people can sell 3 catties of choy sum for $5 or flowering cabbage. So many factors are at play. Therefore, I'm asking you which angle you took. And are you sure that you are looking for the same kind, same type of flowering cabbage? There is only half a minute left. Consultant. I'll try to answer the question of timing first. We know that nearer the time the market closes, prices tend to fall. Therefore, we actually went in the morning peak hours. Because some of the stores might close in the afternoon as well. Therefore, we tried to get as many samples as possible. As for the 22 areas, the main report has been uploaded to the website. If you want to know the characteristics of the 22 FEHD markets, you can take a look. And we have stated what methodology we adopted to look at prices and how the extreme cases were excluded. And again, the information is in the main report. Okay, second round, please do not make use of more than 2 minutes. Lau Siu Lai. Like to ask about the methodology as well. I am not entirely satisfied with the consultant's reply. I know the survey is for reviewing FEHD markets, but there must be the concept of a control group, and that is once this is not present, what will be the situation, so that you know the role and the function of the target of your survey. But now we do not have a control group, and that is a situation where there is no FEHD market. Therefore, the entire survey is lacking in an enlightening effect, and it has a blind spot. I believe the discussion is like in soft sand or quicksand. But then, of course, this has nothing to do with the consultant's work. But I hope the Bureau has heard us. Members of the public are not worried about just prices, but the operating mode of Link. It has its own subsidiaries to also engage in retail. So retailers are forced to suppress prices. And once these small operators are driven out, suddenly their own subsidiaries, who are retail outlets, will jack up prices. This is how link markets operate. I hope you will pay attention to this kind of operation mode in link markets. I hope there will be follow-up surveys. Let's say if you can collect independent data, so we can compare 3 scenarios. 1, only link market. Then, where there is no link market but FEHD markets, and where there is full competition. My proposal is that next time you do such consultant surveys, now before you do that, if you have a sampling methodology, before you actually award the contract, please allow members here to give views. That would be better than just reporting survey results. Members would like the surveys to turn out certain results. So it would be better if we have the chance to give input, and the product may be more instructive. That would benefit our discussion and policy making. And then personally, the DP would like to see this happen first. We should improve the environment and air conditioning and of FEHD markets. We should revitalize them so there will not be so many empty stores. I hope your new manpower will let us see a new mode of FEHD market. But if there is only link or supermarket and people do not have a choice, there is going to be a big impact on people's livelihood. I hope you can go in that direction. Next, Stephen Ho. Is it my turn now? Thank you. In my eyes, the survey is incomprehensive. I hope there will be a supplementary survey before you would quote the results of this survey. If you quote this survey in adjusting your market policies later, I will tell you that I will not accept it. Because as I said, number one, there is a big difference between these markets, and two, the calculation method gives people the impression that you have certain premises for certain columns, and I think that's not fair. And next time you embark on a survey, you should start from demand and supply. And number four, as you said, people are also paying very different rent even in FEHD markets. But Hong Kong is a capitalist society. Even if my rent is very different from the store next to me, I'm going to sell the corn, for example, at a slightly lower price than the next store. But it doesn't mean that there is no necessary or causal link between prices and rent. It is just because this is a distorted situation and people may not see exactly how prices are linked to rent. I hope you will do another survey which is fair and just. Last but not least, Kok Wai Kang. Thank you, Chair. Prices are determined by the market. The FEHD should not present it as a reason or excuse. Rather, you should improve the hardware and software at markets. And two, I still fail to understand why you want to compare Yutong and Java Road markets. You have the Chachimui Road markets and also the Quarry Bay markets. You just don't choose them, but you chose the most vibrant one. It's too obvious what you are trying to do. Consultant, is it just because it's a convenient choice? I think I said already that we are looking for vibrant markets, and we chose the nearest link market, and we must go to Yutong. So it's not that we had a choice. Chairman, you heard him. It was quite forced. I think many members have pointed out the problem with sampling. I think the consultant and the Bureau have heard you. And when you quote from this survey report, we would point this out again. We have 5 minutes. Mr. Kok Wai Kang has submitted a motion. But we only have 3 members in the floor. As the chairman, I should not vote. If we are to deal with the motion, normally we need to have the quorum if we want to vote on the motion, and we need 14 people. So should we deal with it now? If we do, we have to ring the bell. We ring the bell for 5 minutes, then we can vote. But if we can't have 14 people, we won't be able to vote. Secondly, we leave this to the meeting on the 11th of July. We won't discuss it, but we will go directly to the motion at the beginning of the meeting next time. Kok Wai Kang? Chairman, please allow me to introduce the motion, and I think this is the consensus of members. I believe there will be no objection, and I don't think we need to process it. You're not requesting a vote. That's right. That this panel urged the administration to introduce competition and break the monopoly of link in new town markets, including Tinshui, Tongchong, Ma'anshan, and Changquan-O, and that there should be the building of FEHD markets in these areas as well. Okay, you don't request a vote. I think the Bureau has heard me. If that's the case, we are not going to vote on the motion. We are not going to process the motion further. I think the Bureau has heard the expression of view. Okay? Any other views? Anything else? If not, the meeting is adjourned here. Thank you, administration, the consultant, and members for coming.